Hey everyone, and welcome back to Vertical Playpen, the podcast all about experiential and adventure education. And as we've been doing in the last few episodes, we're taking short, I say almost deep dives, but they're almost shallow dives in a very narrow field into certain different areas. And today, I am honored to be talking to Alan about communication styles. You can check out all of his information in the description. I won't go through all of that stuff. We'll skip the fluff and go straight to the stuff. So, Alan, you've been working in this realm since 1992. Your organization, you had worked prior to that in team development also. From your perspective, why do you believe that communication is a skill that needs to be not only identified, but practiced by individuals?
Yeah, we all learn to talk somewhere around 1, 2 years of age, and we think we're great communicators. And most of us get pretty good. We're pretty clear on what we're saying. But what I learned, which was a big surprise to me about 25 years ago, is that people have different communication preferences. And that although I'm quite a good communicator, in my opinion, my style is annoying to other people. And that was a big surprise. And so that's why I think communication needs to be much more intentional. Not if we're having casual conversation, but if it's anything high stakes communication, giving people feedback that they may not want to hear, disagreeing about something and trying to have a conversation about it. It's so easy to slip into my style and focusing on my message and what I want to deliver and not looking at the other person, not reading them, not seeing how they're taking it. And then it's very easy for the other person to make an assumption that, well, if you're asking me a lot of questions, that's not something I usually do. So you must be trying to get me. And it just happens to be, I'm a person that asks a lot of questions. So we interpret the other's behavior through our own filter, and it's often the wrong interpretation. So our intentions as a communicator are often garbled because the other person is reading it through their own filter.
Yeah, and I probably people resonate with this where you're trying to explain something to someone and they're not getting it, and you're frustrated that they're not understanding it. And so you think it's more on them, but it's probably because the way you're explaining and the way you're communicating, it does not align with the way that they engage in a conversation. And I think it's obviously incredibly important in the industry where we are working with individuals that we understand that awareness that there's different styles. For you, you sort of suggested you had a realization of this. Was there a story or a situation that you had that oh my God, there's different styles out there? And maybe that hasn't been addressed publicly before.
And no, I was actually in a workshop with another presenter who was presenting this idea, and I was brand new to me, and it hit me really strong as they talked about your style and this style. I was like, wow, yeah. And then I could kind of see conversations with people, just like you said. I'm trying to explain it, and they'll get this blank look, and I know I'm explaining it clearly, and I'm a person that likes a lot of detail, and I was overwhelming them. And so they just checked out. And I thought they didn't understand, so I gave them more detail, which is obviously the wrong way to go. So understanding that there are some people who want high-level information, other people want the deep dive, and some people, one thing I do in a lot of my workshops, I ask people, what does respect mean? Everybody says that's a really dumb question. Obviously, respect is respect, and they talk about it. Well, some people say, good morning, how are you, good afternoon, lead any conversation. And if not, it's disrespectful. Other people say, you're wasting my time with chit chat. You're here for business. Tell me what you want. So what's respectful behavior to one is disrespectful to another. Not a right or wrong, but it's just different. And so being able to understand that as I'm speaking, I have to be thoughtful of who I'm talking with.
Yeah, I often consider there's different levels of experience that someone can have with working with individuals and groups. And maybe at the start, you're just trying to figure out a basic agenda. What am I going to do with this group? But as you gain more experience, you analyze more. Like, what is the words that I use? How much am I over explaining? And then working with different personality styles out there. We talk a lot about introversion and extroversion in this podcast in terms of participants. But another layer to that as well is, what are they getting from me speaking? Am I accommodating the needs of each person when it comes to the way I'm explaining? So you almost have to be overly introspective when we start to think about how we communicate. Let's go a little deeper. You focused, you created the team communication styles, team being an acronym. what do those are the four primary styles, and how do they differentiate from each other?
Okay, yeah, the team model is based on two dimensions, whether people are more task or people oriented. And again, there's not a right or wrong there, but some people, when they come in to work, they're thinking about the work and they want to get to the work. Other people come in, they want to check in with their coworkers and how everybody's doing. And again, some people find one respectful and the other respectful. The other dimension is how you make decisions. There are people that make kind of a really quick snap decision, and then they're comfortable with risk, so they can adjust as they go and fix it as they get along. Other people are low risk and want to really think it through and much more deliberative. So when you put those two dimensions together, you end up with the T or tell style is somebody who's very task oriented, very direct, quick, wants to get the job done, wants to make quick decisions, doesn't want a lot of conversation. And I had a tell person tell me once that, the analyzers, which is the A, take their time thinking things through, said, I can make a decision. I can make it wrong. I can fix it, still be wrong. I can fix it again, still be wrong, and fix it. They're still thinking. Now I'm set and I'm going and I'm moving forward. So they feel that, quick decisions are more efficient. Again, if you're building a rocket ship to Mars, that doesn't apply. Rocket scientists are not T's. But for most people, most of our decisions, they're not earth-shattering. And to make a quick one and move forward, they don't like a lot of conversation. They like to work on their own. They're not real good collaborators, but they're good at cranking out the work. They just get the work done. That's the T. The E style is also on the faster paced decision-making, but is much more personable. And these people, it's kind of interesting. The E style it stands for engage, and they like to engage with people. They like to talk. They're very persuasive speakers. They're very creative. These are the think outside the box people. And what's interesting, that they're intuitive thinkers. So when I have them in class and I ask somebody, you're a high E, you had to make a decision. What was your basis? When they're telling the truth, they say, it just felt right. It's my gut. And that's how they make good decisions, which again mystifies the A's, which we'll get to in a minute. And they can't explain their decisions. There's a right brain, left brain conversation, and the left brain is the logical, analytical, and that's where language lives. The right brain is intuitive, music, art, creativity. That's where the E's live. So when they make a decision, they don't have language. They have to go over to the other brain. So they can't describe how they got there, but they know it's the right decision, and they make good decisions. So again, kind of a very different style. And then up to the A is the analyzer, and these are the people who are very deliberative. They're task-oriented, but they want to take their time. They want to get it right. They want to check everything, gather a lot of data, and they tend to ask a lot of questions. The T's and the E's don't ask questions, very few. So when the A is asking a lot of questions, the T and the E assumes that the A is nitpicking, giving them a hard time, poking holes in their decision, criticizing them. And all the A is doing is just trying to understand the situation. So again, very different ways of engaging. And last but not least, we have our mediators, the M style. And these are folks that want to play nice. Everybody should just be nice. Let's get along. They're harmonizers. They try to keep things on an even keel. The challenge for the M's is giving corrective feedback or even stating a strong opinion, because they don't want to rock the boat. They want people to be happy and get along well. So that's kind of a thumbnail of the four styles.
And I no doubt, as you were describing that, Alan, like there are people listening to this who are trying to figure out where they are within the four. My assumption is, and I know this, and we'll get onto this in a moment because you had me fill out, we'll go through the questionnaire and go through this and find my report, that you might be weighted in one, but it's certainly not the only thing about you, right? It's that you can find it. It's just probably where you lean more strongly than others, but you can probably moments where I need to tell, like I need to actually engage with that component of communication in this moment, because as a mediator, this is not functioning. Maybe you jump across. Is that accurate?
Yeah, one of the criticisms people have of these models is that we shouldn't pigeonhole people. And I 100% agree. In fact, the reason I call these styles as opposed to personality is because they change. They're very contextually based. So I may be one way at work, another way at home. If I have a client-facing job, I may be one way with clients, and then I'm in my office, I may be acting in a different way. So these are ways we can adapt our personality to fit the context. But we do generally have a preference. All things being equal, I'd prefer to be be this way, but I can change. Certainly in a high ropes adventure situation, you're supportive and kind, and then someone does something really dumb and stupid. You tell them, stop doing that and do this, right? You can just easily shift. Yeah, we can do all four styles, but we have a comfort and a preference, usually for one or maybe two.
Let's say you were being brought into a group to focus on communication with an intact, let's say a corporate team development program, and you're being brought in. Is your first step to engage them through a process of identifying styles? Or what's the flow of a day maybe, or look like for you if you were asked to do something like that?
Yeah, I've found that if I ever write my book, it's called It Depends. Everything depends on styles. And so when I do like a leadership program, multi-day leadership, team is in the first day because number one, it's fun. People like it. They learn about each other. It's a way of breaking the ice and getting people engaged. People like talking about themselves. In the subsequent days, if we talk about giving corrective feedback, if we talk about motivating people, if we talk about managing a team, building a team, it all depends on the style of your team and the style of the person you're talking to. So whatever I present, I end up presenting 4 ways. So you want to give corrective feedback, here's the basics. This is what you do. But if you're talking to a T, you do it this way, and E that way, and A. So everything is contingent to me on the styles. If I'm doing team building with a group, again, I like to get this done early because most people are not offended when they see their score. The only groups sometimes, the T groups, get a little bit like, because they're bulls in a china shop. They just plow in and they recognize that no, people may not like it. But most Ts don't care because they're Ts. It's a pretty safe process. And again, it's a good way to get a team to see that there are some differences that are not value differences. They're not judgment differences. They're not good, better, best, just different. And when we can kind of talk about difference, it depersonalizes conflict. It depersonalizes feelings of negativity. And we can move into, so how are we going to work together, recognizing that we're very different people? What are we going to do? So yeah, to me, it's a great entry experience.
You like one of the things that I think that anchors an experience, or like to the listeners when they're thinking about styles, is or even new models or methods to use, is stories that draw in an emotion from them. Do you have an experience? You've been doing this for a large part of your career, focusing on communication. So you've got probably too many stories to try to pluck from, but do you have something that stands out to you as a moment where you found like this has so much success, this importance is so powerful because of an experience I had?
Yeah. Well, one thing is, before I knew about this model, I worked in an organization where me and a coworker had some very precise work we had to do, and we would critique each other's work. And one day I was really busy. She gave me something to look at, and I looked at it and said, "It's fine." And she said, "Don't you say it's fine. You read it carefully. You fix it." So I did. She was happy. This is an old, going back, I actually took out my red pen. It was not on a computer, and we marked it up. Went home that day, and my wife is a poet. And I walk in the door, and she hands me a poem. I said, "Oh, I know what to do." I took the poem, I sat down at the table, took out my red pen. It did not go well. But we're married still after many years. So I've learned that her style and mine are very different, and to learn to adapt. In the work world, there's another great story. Somebody, an executive assistant, came to one of my classes on communication, learned about team, went back. I didn't know much about her or anything. And then she came to another class where I was talking about team again. And she said, "Oh, everybody, you got to listen up. This is great. It really helped me." So, of course, always love a testimonial.
Mm-hmm.
What was so great about it? She goes, "I get along with my boss now great. I didn't before." I said, "Well, what do you do differently?" She said, "I'm mean to my boss and everything is great." That one really threw me. "You're mean to your boss. Tell me more about that." And it goes back to what I said earlier, that some people who say, "Good morning, how are you?" people don't appreciate it. Other people feel it's mean if you don't. So it turns out her boss was a T. She was an M. And she said, I go in now, I talk to my boss, I tell her what she needs to hear, I listen what she needs to tell me, and I walk right out the door. So I turned to the other T's in the room and I said, "Is that mean?" They said, "That's heaven." She said, "Yeah, I know, but who would want to live that way?" So she was able to make the change in behavior. In her heart, she didn't like it. So I said to her, "Well, how do you get through your day? If you're an M, you need people." She goes, "Oh, there's lots of other M's in the office, and I spend time talking to them, and we engage, and I get what I need there. But for my boss, I'm a highly efficient T. I walk in there, I say what she needs, and I walk out the door. And she said, before that, my boss would be talking to me and typing, looking at the screen, but just really being very rude and dismissive. And I felt very offended. And she goes, now I realize that I was being rude to my boss by asking her about her day and her family and telling her about my family. She didn't want any of that. So when I cut all that out, my boss pays attention to me, I pay attention to her, and off we go. So it's just a great example of how people can change their behavior, but the values don't always change with it. So she was able to do it, but didn't feel real good about it.
It's interesting that, like, I think that what we do often is we take our own personal experience and transpose it onto somebody else and say, because they don't react the same way, X, Y, and Z. But what this also is doing, not only is it teaching the individual about their styles, so you know how you need support and how you communicate, but it actually allows for an empathy for other people, because that without that awareness that that person had of their boss, they would have assumed ill intent consistently until they realized, like, oh no, this has nothing about with the way they react to me. This is just, that's not the way that they communicate. And that feels to me even more powerful than understanding that you are a T or an M, is actually knowing what other people are. Is that sometimes how you use this too, as a way to share that, to know who your co-workers and compatriots are talking?
Absolutely. In fact, that's the most important part of the lesson. Everyone wants to know about themselves. Where we start there, it's engaging. People like to learn. But the most important part is I tell people, okay, so you love your style. You think being a T is great and E is great. It works for you. Well, it turns out it doesn't work for others. And can you think of times when you've been really in your mode and people have not reacted well? And can you now see what their other style may be? In fact, in the report you have, the last page is a chart to help people begin to see who are my coworkers if they haven't taken the assessment, begin to analyze and discern which style they may have, and what do I do differently? How do I change? And so the last half of the report is really focused on how to change to adapt to different styles. That's the key lesson, is not who you are, but it's who everybody else is in relation to you and how you can better connect with them.
So that's a great transition to looking at my report. I think one of the things I brought up to you prior to this was I think it might be interesting for people to experience what you would do post the report with me slightly. So I'm going to give the listeners 5 seconds to make their assumptions based on what they know of me. Do you believe I'm a T, an E, an A, or an M? Okay. You have, at this stage, probably made your decision. And so here are my scores. The way that it comes out when you do the report is that you ultimately have what is known as your team scores. So I've got T-E-A-M. My T is a 0, so I'm not TEL. I've got 4 under E. I've got 16 for A, and then my big heavy hitter is with a 28 is an M. So it seems like I'm more mediator, analytical versus the engage and team. After I've done that, and I can go into the report a little detail, but I'm going to throw it back to you. When you see that from somebody, what are your first thoughts?
Well, my first thing I try to tell people who got a 0 is it didn't mean you failed. It means that it's a style that you just don't find pleasant, comfortable, useful. On the assessment, you get a choice of first and second choice. So maybe it was your third choice, but never your first or second. It comes out. A 0 is not a bad score. There isn't a good or bad score, but it's looking at preference. Yeah, so then I would just talk about the mediator, what it is, that it's a style that likes, as I said earlier, likes to be collegial, likes to work with people, likes to harmonize, tends to avoid a little bit some of the more direct confrontations that might be needed. And then, so I would talk with the person about how they see that working for them. So what are the strengths of the mediator from your perspective? So let me ask you. So how does that work well for you?
Yeah. I think it aligns, and there is another work-based assessment that we use called DISC, and there's great alignment between these two. So I can see those alignments from lots of different perspectives, and then in communication, I can tell you that based on what I'm reading, the M is obviously the best. I know that is, but no, as I says, it includes like connecting with people, and I think that that's a skill that I know that is a positive one about my job. I referenced to you actually before we started recording that I was kind of tired because I just had 4 weeks of training summer camp staff, and I have to do a lot of connecting. And even though I'm comfortable at doing it as a a personal introvert, it does drain me. But I think that it's good for people to hear, because when I tell people that I am more introverted, they are often surprised in the same way you said you were with a colleague, that I'm able to do the job that I do. Because I think too often people think introverted people are socially inept, but it this is completely reaffirming that it actually has nothing to do with my energy or what. It's actually what skills I possess more in a communication setting, and I think I can connect with people.
The other
Yeah.
thing is that these styles are contextually based. If you went to work for an accounting firm, you probably still would be strong
Yeah.
on but your analytical score would go up because you'd have to be giving more detail, spending more time. The work you do is engaging with people. And so in a supportive way, facilitating rather than leading and teaching and talking at people is kind of having them go through an experience. So you're facilitating, which is the style. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Maybe that is your personality, and maybe that's who you are, or maybe you've been in this business a long time, and that's kind of the skill set you needed to build, and that's who you are now.
I think that that's possibly true. I hadn't reflected on that, but as I was filling in it and answering the questions, I was answering them obviously from me who I am now. But if I'd have done it with the person who graduated college, I don't think I could have answered any of the questions I would have answered in that same way. So I think that there would have probably revealed more. I can imagine more on the A and more painfully on the E, sorry, rather than the M. Because the idea of mediation feels like it's almost counterintuitive to maybe my natural state of wanting to connect with on a social, like hanging out with people out of work is not always it's not the first thing I'll jump in to do. But in a work's perspective, I have to do that. So it's interesting how I interact with that both on a personal and a work basis.
Okay, well, the life of the party interacting with people is the E style more than the M. So the M's
That
are
makes
more
sense, yeah.
the quiet connectors rather than the people dancing on the tabletop.
Something that I see as well in the report, where it's like talking about the challenges, maybe slow to make decisions, I can definitely relate to the point where sometimes I annoy myself with that. Is there, like, when I see this, is the some of the intent as well to be able to, because I can be introspective on that, try to notice that more often in myself and then be able to course correct if necessary?
Yeah, the reason M's are slow to make decisions is that they want to make sure everybody's happy. They want to, and any change, somebody's going to be unhappy with the change. So the M's kind of prefer, let's just keep it the way it is. A is your second strongest, and that's also slow to make decisions because it wants to be perfect and precise. So taken to an extreme, both of those are not helpful. So yeah, that's a helpful insight as a person with an M and an A, is this decision really that important? Do I really have to wait? Can I just jump and do it? What's the worst that could happen? I try to, yeah, I think, and my guess is as a facilitator, you don't have the other challenge of an M, which is letting people know when they've done something that hasn't been helpful, being able to speak up. My guess from what little I know of you is that that's not a challenge, but it is for M's. Again, in general, they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. M's also, by the way, are highly empathetic listeners. And again, important for your profession to be able to really hear what people are saying, read people. And the M's are really good at that. They're probably the most emotionally intelligent of the four styles. And, but yeah, the challenge is being more assertive.
And I think that I can reflect on, certainly, I would say, and he may listen to this, but my supervisor, my boss, if I was to guess, and I'm once again guessing without this, but looking as I'm reading this, I would think he would be more on the T side. So I think in the exact same way that you had that executive assistant, I think that it helps me to be able to say, like, I'm very concerned about making decisions because I'm worried about how the other people may think. But actually, the only other people who are probably worrying about that are the M's. And it's,
Right.
the T's are probably come on, just give me something,
Yeah.
so I can see that in the team dynamics. And I've certainly seen that when I facilitate programming, if I'm doing a problem solving activity where I see those people who hate the analytical side of things and say, well, can't we just do it? Because of the hesitancy that others have for making mistakes can kind of supersede even the telling piece, because maybe socially, the tellers probably get a bad rap from being rude versus being assertive. And maybe those two don't align very well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge for the T, is to understand that when they're really blunt with you, they want you to be blunt with them. They don't take it personally. but they don't realize that everybody else does take it personally. And that, that's the other part of emotional intelligence, not just knowing yourself, but knowing how you're engaging with others. And so again, I think that's one of the insights of models like this, is that it helps people. If I'm looking at you, you have all this, how do I understand your behavior? Well, if I have this framework, I can begin to look and say, yeah, Phil kind of falls more into this box. I can make sense out of that. But again, we're not pigeonholing, saying, you're always an M and only an M. But in the kind of work you do, that's probably your go-to style.
I can already visualize, Alan, how I'll be able to utilize this knowledge of these four styles with participants that I work with, because I think that the word communication sometimes gets brought up in team development as a bit of a buzzword. Like we're focusing on communication, but what this does is create more specificity around communication. It gives us something to actually a skill to work upon rather than just amorphously saying we need to be better communicators.
Yes.
What's your goal as we move forwards into when we think about communication styles? Like, what is your hope that we get to a point? And I could easily very much go political at this point, so I'm going to steer clear of that. But like, we know that the world is not the greatest at communicating. So what's your hope with some of with these styles?
Well, yeah, and again, without going too much in political, but we're in a very divisive country. Everybody has almost joined sides. There's very few people left in the middle, and many people on each side hate the other side. And so one thing that team is maybe a metaphor for is that people are different, and we have different values and different beliefs and different understandings. And my belief is that people are generally good at heart, and they want to do well, and they feel threatened by the other or attacked by the other. And that's what's going on in our countries. Everybody feels attacked by each other. And if we could just see the humanity in each other and recognize that, political styles is another style. And we need to find our way to the middle. The goal with team is that if you're a T, it's not to give up being a T, but to know when you're dealing with an E, A, or M, can you meet them in the middle? And can you ask them to be a little faster, a little more direct? And you could be a little slower, a little more listening. And you meet in the middle. So it's not giving up who you are, but finding a way to the center. And with teams, it becomes another great story someone shared with me, is that an employee went into the boss's office and said, I'm an A, you're a T. I need you to be an A for a minute and answer all my questions. But what it did, instead of saying, you never talk to me, we gave these labels, which kind of depersonalizes it. It's not you, it's your style. Your style is a problem for me. Here's my style. How can we make this work? So again, it kind of gives us permission to talk about things without being offended or as offended. So yeah, my hope is that the world will be a better place. Right now, it's a really tough situation.
Yeah, and I want to appreciate what you said about the style is not defining you, but defining the way that you interact. Like, it's the same when we talk about emotions. Like, you are not an angry person; you are experiencing anger, and trying to separate the person from the emotion and the person from the style certainly helps to get rid of the offense that can be seen if people associate themselves or others with that world. Like, this is who you are, and therefore you're rude, rather than being, this is how you communicate, and to me it might seem rude. So I think there's like a reframe there. And it's also striking, as I'm thinking about this, that this is not something that gets taught to human beings at a young age, and that we're having to, as adults, figure this stuff out now, because it seems like this is a fundamental human quality, is our awareness of how we talk to each other and how we listen to each other.
Yeah, something really exciting is that I'm involved a little bit with the workforce development community here. And one of the people in a leadership role said, we need to teach this at high school. And it would need some tweaking to do it. But he's pursuing that, which I think would be wonderful, because, you leave high school, it's a sheltered environment. You've been there for 12, 13 years. You kind of know the rules. You can raise your hand, get a note from your parents. You go out into the work world, none of that works. And so to at least have this framework as you go out into the work world and see how your boss is treating you, that it's not personal, it's not bullying. Your boss is under some pressure and this is what he needs to have done, and here's how he engages, or he's very friendly. It doesn't mean that you get to take a pass. He's being nice and engaging you, but he's got work to do. So I think it would be a great framework for high school ages to begin to learn that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this, Alan. Once again, I'm going to throw all of the information in the description of this. So please check out more about Alan and more about T.E.A.M. And if you want any more information from him, I will also put his email into this as well, in ways to be able to get in contact. And Alan is also on LinkedIn, so I'll put that in there as well. So thank you once again, Alan, for sharing this. It's very clear that you have a great history in this industry, in communication styles, and a great passion for it. So I just want to say thank you for putting this out into the world, because as we sort of suggested, it's very much needed. Whatever style you are, or whatever whatever world you work in, if you're a human being and you communicate, you need to understand your style. So thank you, Alan.
Well, thanks, Phil. I really appreciate you having me on.